When studying reversible reactions, it is often helpful to predict the direction a reaction will shift when under a variety of conditions. Excuse my pronunciation of a French person's name just for a moment. Le Chatelier's principle basically states that if you stress a system at equilibrium, the system will shift in a way that will relieve that stress. Now there are 3 different major kinds of stress that we can add or subtract to a system. The first type of stress is the addition or subtraction of reactants or products. The second type of stress is a change of volume. And the last kind of stress, that can even change equilibrium constants, is a change of temperature. Now let's consider all 3 of these kinds of stress in metaphors to see if we can visualize their impact. The first kind of stress, the addition or subtraction of reactants or products, can be visualized with a simple balancing example. Let's say you have a plank that is balancing on 2 blocks. When the plank is flat, it represents the equilibrium system having the ratio defined by the equilibrium constant. If I add an extra product block, let's say tipping the plank, we're no longer at equilibrium. The board is no longer level. So the equilibrium will need to shift some of these blocks or a portion of the block towards the reactant side to get us back to equilibrium balance. We can visualize that as our original blocks being there, and then half of this block going back. Now these numbers don't need to be exact, and it's really a metaphor for achieving equilibrium again, but you can see how that shift would need to occur. Please note that these new concentrations under the new equilibrium are different from before. Here's our original and here's our new one. Okay, let's consider the case where we remove a reactant or product instead of add one. Let's say we completely remove all of the product in the container. In that case, some of our original reactant will need to shift to the right towards the product side to fill that gaping hole in balance. And we'll end up with less reactant than before, but we'll get back to that equilibrium balance. These questions become much more interesting as we move into acid and base chemistry and solubility. The second kind of stress is a change in volume. This literally changes the molarity and the partial pressures, if it's gases, which messes with the equilibrium. Think about it. Molarities are in our equilibrium expressions, which are moles divided by liters. There's that volume unit. Or PV equals nRT, controlling the partial pressures. If we change the volume, we change the pressure. You can visualize this with a rather silly example. Let's say you want to move as many people as efficiently possible up and down on an elevator system. Your choices are moving 4 people, or 2 people. Now, if you have an elevator that's fancy and large, you can totally fit 4 people inside of a fancy, large elevator. But what if you're in a building that has a really old-fashioned elevator, like one of those ones with the grates that you have to pull down by yourself? I'm thinking that 4 people can't fit into that elevator very comfortably, so it might be more efficient to send 2 people at a time. This analogy works really well with both gaseous and aqueous situations. Let's consider, for example, that instead of 4 people, we were actually talking about 4 moles of gas in a common reaction. And those 4 moles of gas could yield 2 moles of gas. In that scenario, if you increase my volume by having a larger elevator, our equilibrium would shift to the left to be more efficient. If I decreased my volume by using a tiny old-fashioned elevator, I would shift my equilibrium to the right to be more efficient in a tiny elevator. The same goes for aqueous scenarios. Let's say you have the reaction, which is rather common in certain first-year chemistry labs, where we have some aqueous iron 3, some SCN minus, that yields a complex ion FeSCN2+. In this scenario, if I increase the volume by doing something like diluting my sample, I make more room for more people to fit on the elevator, so my reaction will shift left toward my reactants. If I decrease the volume by doing something like evaporating my solvent, I would shift my equilibrium to the right to fit inside, or to fit the most people comfortably inside of a tiny elevator. You can use this elevator example anytime you need to consider changing volume. The last kind of stress that we're going to consider is the change of temperature. Let's go back to that really fun example with the nitrogen and the hydrogen gas yielding ammonia. This particular reaction also happens to have a delta H of negative 92 kilojoules. That negative right there indicates that this reaction is exothermic, which means we can treat heat as if it's a product. So what I'm going to do when I consider all of these kinds of problems is write heat down as a product if it's exothermic. So product when it's exothermic, which is indicated by delta H being negative. Or I will write down heat as a reactant, but only if the question says that the reaction is endothermic, or if it implies it by saying that delta H is positive. In these cases, you can treat the shifting just like you would in the original examples of adding or subtracting moles of reactants or products. For example, if I decrease the heat by adding some ice or something to my scenario, my reaction will shift to the right to fill that hole. If I increase the heat, that's like I'm adding a reactant or adding an extra block underneath of my plank, we will shift to the left to decrease that stress. Make sure that you go through plenty of these practice examples, as they become exceedingly interesting as we go over different types of equilibrium.